The Emancipation Proclamation is a remarkable document. It's remarkable for its vision, right, for declaring unequivocally that the Union Army will be an army of liberation. It's also remarkable because it doesn't actually liberate any enslaved person. It, of course, exempts people who are enslaved in the loyal border states, those slave states that side with the Union, Missouri, Maryland, Kentucky, and Delaware. So enslaved people are not covered in those states by the provisions of the proclamation. But the proclamation makes clear that the war has become a war of liberation and that the presence of the Union military means that freedom has come to enslaved people who are in areas under Union control. It also initiates the enlistment of African American men as soldiers and sailors in the Union military. So it's a remarkable document, less for what it achieves immediately and more for its symbolic value and for the path that it promises to open for African Americans, but also for the United States as a whole. And it certainly remains of tremendous importance to African American communities through the Civil War and then well after the Civil War, right? It's the document that's heralded as the earliest moment of the official end of slavery in the United States.
In 1862, the Confederacy is still in full-scale rebellion. Lincoln is moving towards embracing kind of a more militant anti-slavery policy, but he needs some important victories. And by September of 1862, he thinks he has that, so he issues the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, saying that if the Confederate states are still in rebellion at the turn of the year, January 1st, 1863, he will issue the new Emancipation Proclamation offering freedom to the slaves of these rebelling states. Of course, January 1st comes around, the Confederate states are still in rebellion, so he does issue the Emancipation Proclamation offering freedom to these states, to the slaves in the rebelling states. It is important to note that he does distinguish between areas of the South that are still in open rebellion and those that have already been conquered. So parts of Louisiana, for example, are exempted from this because they've already been put under Union control. So in those areas, the slaves are not freed.
The Emancipation Proclamation is important for three big reasons. First and foremost, we have to be clear that it only frees people in states in rebellion. It frees people in the District of Columbia, right? We have to understand that that's really important, that it didn't immediately free everybody come January 1st. The second thing that we need to understand about the Emancipation Proclamation is that it allows for the formation of the United States colored troops. From the beginning of this conflict, at the first firing at Fort Sumter, free black men were begging to be able to sign up for service and were being denied. They were being denied not because their soldiering wasn't needed. They were being denied because they didn't want to offend the South by having black men armed as soldiers. So now the Emancipation Proclamation says we're going to form these units and we're going to put white officers in charge of them, and now we're going to allow them to move forward. And what is remarkable, within a few short months, the United States military is able to grow its ranks by over 180,000 men who sign up for the Army, half of whom were formerly enslaved men who had made their ways to federal camps and were now going to soldier. We're now actually going to fight for their freedom. The other 20,000 are serving in the U.S. Navy, and many of them were already on those vessels to begin with. So that's the second most important thing. And then the third thing is this solidifying of, if you're in the camp, if you are there, you are in fact a free person now. Now, Lincoln clearly understood that this was only going to work as long as we were in a state of war. But he laid the legal groundwork in these executive orders to be able to move that idea forward eventually as constitutional amendments.
Yeah, historians still debate how Lincoln balanced his desire for emancipation and his concern with preserving the Union. Some people say and Lincoln kind of said this himself, if he could preserve the Union without freeing any slaves, he would do it. If he could preserve the Union only by freeing all the slaves, he would do it. And ultimately, that's what he chose to do. People that are sympathetic to Lincoln argue that he always wanted to free the slaves, but if he'd acted any earlier, it would have backfired, and that he was a very shrewd politician and waited till the right moment when there was the necessary public support and kind of military victories to make emancipation a popular, effective strategy rather than it just looking desperate.
The Emancipation Proclamation is the culmination of Abraham Lincoln's struggle with what he could do constitutionally in order to place limitations on slavery. And it is clear throughout his career that he is struggling with this question of what he, as president, has authority to do. And there were pressures on him from the very earliest period of the war to do something like this in order to undermine the South. And yet Lincoln was afraid that if he did it out of season, that it would be proclaimed as an unconstitutional grab at power, something that the executive, that the president had no power to do. And therefore, he waited for an opportune moment, both politically and constitutionally, so that he could defend it as a military necessity.